Yuji is the main character of Jujutsu Kaisen. As a Jujutsu Kaisen fan myself, I thought that this statement was common sense because, I mean, obviously that's the case. But for quite a while now, the idea that Yuji isn't the main character for a myriad of different reasons has started to crop up within the community. Initially, I thought this was some very niche subgenre of fans who are overwhelmingly in the minority, probably not even numbering in the thousands, but it's become such a frequent discussion that I am subjected to that my stance on the matter has changed. So much so that I have decided to make a full video on it. In this video, I'll be going over many of the arguments I have seen in favor of other characters being the protagonist of the story, explain why they are incorrect, and hopefully convince some lost souls and reassure some others as to why Yuji is the real main character of Jujutsu Kaisen. Now in this video, there are going to be two parts, two sides of me that you guys are going to see. The first side is going to be much more, let's just say, scholarly in terms of my approach to the main character discussion. I'll be using the story, statements from the author, and generally speaking, more intelligent points to argue in favor of Yuji being the protagonist. The second side is going to be me being a bit less civilized. There will still be facts and good arguments here and there, but you'll also be privy to hear an insult or five. But before we even get into that, let's start by taking a look at the misconceptions themselves. When looking at the people who think that Yuji fails as a main character, or even worse, simply isn't one, I found that there are three different ways that they mainly attempt to make their point. The first is that Yuji can't be the main character because he isn't the strongest or most influential in the series. The title of strongest currently goes to either Gojo or Sukuna, and as of right now, Yuji isn't even a top 5 character in the series when it comes to influence. This is probably the most common form of argument I've seen going against him. And while I can somewhat understand why someone would take these bits of information and draw the conclusions that they have, the foundation of their argument would make Swiss cheese look solid. The second point I see people bring up tackles the idea that he simply doesn't do anything. For large stretches of the series, Yuji is not the POV character, nor is he the one that we hone in on, and because of that, apparently he is not the main protagonist of the series. Once again, part of this sentiment is true, and it's why many people latch onto this idea. However, once again, the numbers don't quite add up the way people making this argument think they do. The third argument that I see most in the wild is probably also the most stupid, because a certain section of the fan base prefer other characters over him and think that because he isn't the most popular or well-loved in the series, he just loses his main character powers somehow. Now, I'm gonna be honest, this is just a dumb thing to think, and I hope that everyone watching this video can understand why I find it so silly to have this opinion. Now, there are certainly other sentiments that Yuji deniers like to perpetuate that strip him of his protagonism, but those are much less relevant to the discussion as a whole, and as such will be addressed later in this video. The first misconception that I brought to the table is probably the strongest one in terms of holding up to scrutiny, but that doesn't quite mean it's all that strong. You see, strength is almost never a litmus test for being the main protagonist. If it was, many characters that anime fans automatically understand are the main characters would be stripped of that title instantly. In fact, it's very rare in a battle shonen especially that the main protagonist is the unambiguous strongest character alive until the very end of the story. Typically, they start off rather weak in the grand scheme of things and slowly climb to the top through hardships and effort. Take Goku, for example. He is someone that I think all of us can agree is the main character of the Dragon Ball franchise, right? I mean, the entire story centers around him and his journey, so he has to be the MC. However, going based off the idea that strength determines who the protagonist is, Goku has actually never been the main character, considering that there has always been someone in the Dragon Ball universe who is stronger than him. Even in Dragon Ball Super, up to where we are currently in the manga, he is not the most powerful guy alive. Beerus, Whis, Zeno, the Grand Priest, all of these characters are more powerful than Goku, and that means that he can't be the main character, right? But hold on, maybe that's just an outlier though. So let's take a look at the big three. Because in all of those series, Ichigo, Luffy, and Naruto are the strongest right from the start, right? Oh wait, they aren't, are they? Naruto isn't the strongest character in the verse until Kage is defeated, and Ichigo isn't the strongest until the death of Yuha. Maybe in Luffy's case, you could say he is currently the strongest in the verse with Gear 5, but that only happened after 1,000 chapters of manga. You gonna tell me that these three characters aren't the MCs of Bleach, One Piece, and Naruto respectively until their series are almost over? Come on now. let's be serious. But hold on, let me try to be fair, right? Let's take a step back. Because in the beginning, I technically said that part of the first criticism is strength, but another part of what strips Yuji of his protagonist points, apparently, is the fact that he isn't the most influential character in his own series yet. Well, that's more of a fair point, right? I was kind of straw-manning the first set of people, because this changes things, except when you realize that in Naruto and Ichigo's case, there are entities that exist that are entirely possible for their universe in the first place. The Soul King is the reason the universe exists in the capacity that it does, and Aizen is the reason Ichigo is comprised of the races that he is. In Naruto's case, the very idea of chakra was introduced into the world by Kaguya, and all of shinobi history was essentially handcrafted by Black Zetsu. For Luffy, you could say things are slightly less extreme, but Roger is the one who kicked off the age of pirates to begin with, and Shanks is the reason that Luffy has a devil fruit in the first place. Even when being super duper generous to each main character of the big three, they only become the most powerful and influential beings in their respective verses hundreds of chapters into the stories that they are in. But no one in their right mind would dare say that Ichigo isn't the main character of Bleach, or Luffy isn't the main character of One Piece, or Naruto isn't the main character of fucking Naruto. If you said that to someone on the street, they'd slap the piss out of you. The entire story structure is built on the main character's journey, and we only get to see that if they don't start off as a god in their own universe. To put it simply, strength and influence do not a main character make. Oftentimes, the main character is very influential to the main story, and as time progresses, they are extremely strong. Many times, the strongest, but that doesn't happen all at once, and it's not a prerequisite in the slightest. Even if some level of both of these things were necessary though, which I want to clarify, they aren't, Yuji has them. Being the vessel of Sukuna is itself a huge deal for the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. By allowing him to incarnate into flesh, the story took a massive turn that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And while he isn't the strongest character in the series by any means, he also isn't the weakling that many make him out to be. And considering the fact that he's been a sorcerer for less than a year, I can't blame him for not suddenly beating out characters who have been doing this for decades, or in some cases, millennia. The story of Jujutsu Kaisen isn't over yet, and it's absurd to say that Yuji isn't the main character just because he hasn't fundamentally changed the world like Gojo, Kenjaku, or Sukuna quite yet. Now, the second argument, if you can even call it that, is just built around the idea that a main character must always be the main focus, or they somehow lose their main character privileges. Let's ignore the fact that Goku doesn't even show up for a large portion of the Namek saga, or the fact that a ton of content building up to Sasuke's fight with Itachi has nothing to do with Naruto, or the fact that Ichigo doesn't show up for large stretches of the Fake Kakurutan arc. Let's ignore all of that and say that Yuji is somehow not the focus of the story because sometimes Gege has the gall, the audacity to focus on other characters. I mean, how dare he really? Megumi? Maki? Gojo? Yuta? Ugh. Why would he spend time fleshing out the main cast apart from Yuji? It's such a weird thing to do, right? I mean, it's not like fans complain about manga ignoring side characters for the sake of the main protagonist. No one's ever complained about something like that. I mean, damn, Gon ain't even in the manga for God knows how long, and people can somehow get it through their heads that he's the main character up until his exit, can't they? I truly wonder what makes it so hard to understand in Yuji's case, because even at its most extreme, he won't be the focus for like what, 30 chapters? After his fight with Higuruma, Yuji's absent from the story for a while. I'll give y'all that. But damn, can Gege not write about other characters? I mean, I wish he gave certain characters even more breathing room, but some fans act like they didn't develop object permanence just because Yuji isn't shoved in your face every week. Y'all just forget he exists. I get it, all right? Yuji isn't in the story as much as some other Battle Shonen protagonist may be. Naruto is probably in Naruto at a higher percentage than Yuji is in Jujutsu Kaisen. Up to this point in the manga, he might not be the head honcho, but the story of JJK is primarily told through his perspective, and it's been set up to tell his story first and foremost. Other narratives don't just disappear because of that though. Gojo is important, Megumi is important, Yuta is important, Maki is important. A ton of characters in the series are important to telling the overarching narrative of Jujutsu Kaisen, but that doesn't mean that Yuji is any less of a main character because of that. Speaking of Yuta, real quick, I hate to break it to all of his fans, but he was never going to be the main character of the series. Gege has said as much in an interview. That doesn't mean you have to like him any less or that his character is now worse just because of that, but Gege pretty explicitly said that Yuta's role as the MC was always meant to be confined to Volume 0, and with the main manga, he wanted to go with a different hero, obviously referring to Yuji. For all of the skeptics, he literally talks about Yuji meeting Megami and gaining access to the world of sorcery, very similar to Rukia and Ichigo in Bleach, and he also talks about him swallowing a curse to gain power. So outside of just straight up screaming from the rooftops that Yuji is the protagonist of Jujutsu Kaisen, Gege couldn't get more obvious. To put it plainly, Yuji being a slightly less important component to every facet of the story is not only likely to be a temporary truth, but even if it wasn't, it doesn't really matter. All it means is that Gege writes his protagonist slightly different from the norm. Having your shonen MC be a little bit more grounded in a world full of experts isn't even that groundbreaking of a concept either. Gon could catch 90% of the strays that Yuji catches in this very discussion by nature of him not being all that important in the grand scheme of things. What's necessary for a main character to be a main character isn't importance, it's perspective. Gon isn't the MC of Hunter x Hunter because he's the linchpin of the universe. He's the MC because we are exploring the world of Hunter x Hunter from his perspective, through his eyes. And the same thing rings true for Yuji. Now, this is the part where I become a bit of an asshole, even more so than I was being before. So I apologize in advance, but for all the people that think this, I want you to really level with me. How the fuck do you think that popularity is directly correlated to who the main character of a particular series is? Like, how have you, as a supposedly functional human being, really gotten to the point where you think that the general consensus surrounding a character is enough to give someone main character status or take that role away from some other character? You think I'm making this up, right? Like, no person, nobody could have possibly said this, but that's just not the case. These are real things said by real people, and granted, it's like 2 people that I have documented, but it still pisses me off, okay? Now, just to level with you guys, does it really make me so angry that I have to sit in my room and scream about it? It's really not that deep. Nah, I just kind of think it's funny. But on a real note, I have seen people genuinely argue that because Gojo or Megami sometimes rank higher in the popularity poll, they are somehow the central figures of the story, superseding Yuji's importance. But you want to know what's really funny, specifically in the case of people who think that Gojo is the main character for this reason? If you looked at the most recent popularity poll for the characters, guess what? Gojo isn't first, and he isn't second. He's third. Definitely a high ranking for a character. And it's obvious that fans of JJK love him. I'm not denying that. But he got outvoted by over 10,000 votes. Speaking strictly off the numbers, he is closer to Choso in popularity than he is Yuji. But the thing is, it doesn't matter. Even if Yuji was somehow the least popular character in the story, it wouldn't change the fact that he is the leading actor in this play. No matter what you think, no matter how you feel, Yuji is the main character of Jujutsu Kaisen. It isn't a conversation, it isn't a debate, it isn't a discussion, it's a fact that Gege himself has allowed me to decree from the heavens. This video's existence is kind of funny in and of itself because in my eyes, it's such an obvious open and shut case, but enough people, just enough, have shared this sentiment with me or in JJK discourse in general for me to cover it, at least partially in good faith and with complete sincerity. I put a poll up on my channel, right, asking people if they think that Yuji is the main character, and the overwhelming majority said that he was, right? I think the numbers were like 70% to 30% or something like that. However, the crazy thing to me is that 30% of like 60 to 70,000 people is still tens of thousands of people thinking that Yuji isn't the main character. Sure, that's by far not the majority, but it's just a crazy number to really think about. And for everyone who thought that some other character superseded Yuji as the protagonist, whether it be Yuta, Megami, or Gojo, I hope I was able to guide you to the light. And I apologize if my methods were a little bit mean. I wanted this to be funny and venty, so I wasn't really as gentle as I may have been in another circumstance. For everyone else, all the people that started this video on the right side of this whole debacle, thank you for watching this and sticking around to the end, and I hope this was as fun for you to watch as it was for me to make. If you want to see more Jujutsu Kaisen content, or even more generally speaking, unhinged rants responding to hot takes in anime discourse, like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.